This is a clip of Macron. It's subtitles for those watching on YouTube, and I'm going to read or speak over it rather, what he said for those listening on podcast. It was at first an anger against a tax, and the Prime Minister responded by canceling and removing all increases scheduled to start for the next year. But this anger is deeper. I feel it is justified in many ways. It is 40 years of malaise that is resurfacing. Malaise of workers that can no longer find places for themselves. Malaise of territories, neighborhoods, villages. And we will see public services diminish, an environment that is disappearing. Democratic malaise where the sentiment is not being heard is growing. Malaise in the society, in the face of changes in our society, a secularism that has been disturbed, and up against a way of life that creates barriers and distance. It was a long time coming. It's here now. No doubt, over the past year and a half, we have not provided answers. I take my share of responsibility. And I may have given the impression that I did not care about that I have had other priorities. I know that I have hurt some of you with my words. Many other countries are struggling through bad times.
Sorry if you offended.
Sorry that you feel bad, but I believe we can find a way out of this together. I want this for France because it's been our mission throughout history to launch a path that has never been explored. For us and for the world, we will respond to this economic and social urgency with strong measures, by cutting taxes more rapidly, by keeping our spending under control but not with U-turns. We want France where one can live in dignity through one's work, and on this point we have gone too slowly. I want to intervene quickly and concretely on this issue. I ask the government and parliament to do what is necessary so we can live better in his work so one can live better on his work salary from the beginning of next year. The salary of minimum wage worker will increase by 100 euros this month, starting in 2019, with no extra cost to employers. For those who get less than 2,000 euros each month, starting in 2019, we will cancel Social Security tax hike passed this past year. The effort we asked for was too big, and it was not fair. So these are Macron's words. You could see there he's conflating a lot there. He's conflating some of the xenophobia that has spiked in France due to immigration. He's conflating in the rhetoric of a 40-year problem. He's still taking aim at the French social model. And along with that, he refused some of the demands of protesters to reinstate a wealth tax, which of course not only needs to happen, but needs to be radically expanded as we seize oligarch money to invest in the future, to cause to address the problems that things like this gas tax were really supposed to address theoretically. And let's get specifically into that. In France, 80% of fuel is diesel. In just the past year, the price of diesel has risen by 23%. Macron's plan on the increase of diesel sparked widespread protest, and the Yellow Vest movement comes from a French law that requires every vehicle owner to purchase a yellow vest. American liberals were quick to attack the protests and leftist support for them and back Macron's regressive policies by suggesting that it was an anti-environmental movement, one opposed to dealing with the demands of changing our energy economy and dealing with the climate crisis. And I won't even give them credit for being half right. They're less than a fourth right. They are entirely missing the reality that this punitive measure to punish everyday workers when the real foundations of the climate crisis are in a consumeristic capital economy, driven by capital, driven by oligarchies and energy cartels that warp policy, take money out of people's pockets, and damage the public good. The only way to address this is by nationalizing oil companies, mass redistribution of wealth, and extremely high taxation for the wealthy. And it's why one of the major demands of the movement has been the reintroduction of the tax on the wealthiest French people, something Macron repealed and has still not backed down on, you notice in that speech. Much of the activity of the Yellow Vest movement has occurred in areas between the rural and urban communities. For those, there is little choice but to drive a car. The tax is overwhelmingly would have been on the backs of those who could least afford it. The flames were only stoked when the debates in the 2019 finance law revealed that more than 500 million euros from the fuel tax will go not to ecological transition, but to cover the deficit of the 2019 budget as a result of the abolition of the wealth tax, literal redistribution of wealth from the bottom to the top. The protest movement has contested this important terrain, and we will see more and more in years to come of who should pay for the destruction of our environment. Well, we say the industries and interests that cause that destruction, not the people living inside that context. The movement has, of course, rapidly expanded and now includes public sector workers, students, small business employees, shop owners, and artisans, and a host of precarious workers and long-term unemployed, in addition to a proliferation of women taking the lead. It's important to note that though this is a protest against austerity, it has not taken place in the workplace, and it requires a more careful analysis of its goals. There have been a variety of sentiments and strategies deployed in these protests, and people on both sides of the political divide have tried to make it theirs. The fascist forces of Marine Le Pen and the National Front have tried to make it their own. Mélenchon and the left have embraced it and tried to make it their own, but instead what we see is a proliferation of organic uprisings across the country demanding very good things, but also attracting all sectors of politics, including fascists. That's why we have, we've seen in certain areas chants break out that are racist, homophobic, xenophobic, and sexist in nature. We've seen the efforts of the National Front to woo the movement and try to make it part of their own fascist movement. The Italian example is very cautionary, where similar protests had taken place in Italy and were capitalized by the Northern League without a strong leftward presence and, of course, a center not able to properly respond to these demands and, in fact, creating these demands. So the task of the left is to go into this contested space, recognize the absolutely correct sentiments there, but not have a sort of mystical belief in the power of crowds. Crowds draw everybody, and movements draw a vast amount of people, things, and ideologies. It's a contested space. The sentiment, the anger, the movement is right. But we can never allow it to be defined on fascist terms. Macron's minor concessions should not halt the movement that has already been able to seriously challenge the government. It's unclear what will come of this movement, but it has radical potential to create a new political formation that challenges the tired politics represented by Macron. That's right. Macron's 1990s AOL politics might be the sort of cause célèbre and de jour of delusional, disconnected centrist types. But in the real world, this type of politics is already aged out and done, even as it has a late and disastrous arrival in France. The continued fight will define the next phase of the ecological movement. Will it accept its responsibility to the planet, or will it use an outsized political power to try to make the poor pay for the greed and abuse of the rich?